Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. Have you ever felt this kind of weird thing where the world is just moving so fast that you're getting left behind?
Yeah.
Like we've traded something really important for all this progress we've made.
hmm
Well, today we're diving into some pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay.
Some sociology and politics,
Right.
even some cultural commentary
Interesting.
with Simon Winlow's book,
Okay.
The Politics of Nostalgia.
I've heard of this one. Yeah.
The Amazon link is down in the description.
Oh, cool.
And make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already.
Yeah.
It really helps other people find the show. So Winlow's book really digs into why so many people, especially working class folks, feel this really intense
Yeah.
longing for the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just like missing home.
Right.
It goes way deeper than that.
It's a lot more complicated than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating is how Winlow connects this whole nostalgia thing to huge shifts in the economy. Like the decline of industry in Britain.
Mhm.
It's not just, being sentimental.
Right.
It's a reaction to some very real
Okay.
economic and social upheaval.
Okay, so paint that picture for us a little bit.
Right.
What happened and how does that tie into this longing for the good old days?
Well, imagine
Yeah.
entire communities, right?
Yeah.
Built around these factories and mines and shipyards,
Mm-hmm.
places where generations of families had worked
Yeah.
and had this sense of purpose,
Yeah.
stability,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
those industries start to just vanish.
Wow.
Jobs disappear, towns get smaller.
Right.
And that feeling of security that everyone had, it just evaporates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Winlow actually spent time with people in Northern England,
Okay.
mostly white working class men
Okay.
who lived through all of this.
Mhm.
And they talked about good wages and the close-knit communities and just the feeling that they were part of something bigger than themselves.
Wow.
And it's that contrast between what was and what is now,
Yeah.
that really fuels their nostalgia.
So it's like those memories, they become even more powerful. Right?
Totally.
Because they're set against this backdrop of economic hardship and uncertainty.
See, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it raises this whole question about who we even consider working class anymore.
Oh, interesting.
Like the old definitions are kind of
Yeah.
blurring a little bit.
Right.
But Winlow argues that if we only focus on those differences,
Mm-hmm.
it actually hides the shared anxieties
Yeah.
that many groups are feeling.
Right.
That sense that things are kind of slipping away.
I see. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So it's not about erasing those differences, right?
No, not at all.
But it's about understanding that this economic hardship and this rapid change
Right.
can create some common ground,
Yeah.
even across these really diverse backgrounds. And this is where Winlow's critique of the modern left gets really interesting, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
He's basically saying that they've kind of abandoned this group.
He does make that claim, and it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, he suggests that the left shifting toward cultural issues, while definitely important,
Right.
has kind of left a gap in addressing those core economic anxieties
Yeah.
that a lot of working class people have.
Right.
And he argues that this is part of what fueled movements like Brexit,
Oh, wow.
this feeling of being unheard
Yeah.
and being left behind by the very forces that traditionally champion their cause.
Wow. That's a really bold statement.
Yeah, it is.
It makes you wonder if maybe we've lost sight of something important, right?
Yeah.
In our pursuit of progress and all that.
Yeah, maybe.
But before we get too far down that road,
Yeah.
it is worth noting that
Yeah.
Winlow acknowledges that his research focuses on a very specific group.
He does. His sample, those men in Northern England, they obviously don't represent the entire working class.
Right.
He's very clear about that. But he argues that these core themes, economic hardship, social change, and that resulting nostalgia, they resonate far beyond his specific sample.
So he's saying, look, I focused on this one group,
Right, exactly.
but these feelings,
Yeah.
they're much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he's also adamant that it's not about clinging to some perfect past, right? These folks,
Yeah.
they aren't delusional or anything.
Absolutely. He emphasizes
Yeah.
that they're very aware of the flaws of the past,
Yeah.
but they see a clear decline in their own lives,
Right.
in living standards, in the strength of their communities, in opportunities for the next generation.
Yeah.
And things just feel more precarious compared to, when they were younger.
Right.
And that fuels their apprehension about the future.
So it's like they're saying, hey,
Yeah.
we know things weren't perfect,
Yeah.
but things have gotten worse.
Yeah. That's it.
And that's where the power of nostalgia really kicks in, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
When the present feels shaky,
Yeah.
those comforting memories become even more alluring.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that actually work, like psychologically?
That's where Winlow gets into like the fascinating inner workings of nostalgia.
Oh, okay.
He talks about how specific memories, even seemingly mundane ones,
Yeah.
can trigger these intense positive emotions.
Wow.
And when the present feels unstable or disappointing,
Right.
those positive feelings associated with the past, they just get amplified.
Yeah.
It's like seeking comfort in the familiar when everything around you feels uncertain, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just about longing for a specific time or place, right?
Right.
It's about craving that feeling of stability, of belonging, of
Yes.
knowing where you fit in.
Totally. And
Yeah.
what's striking is
Yeah.
how consistent these experiences were. Across his whole research study, he found these like shared threads running through everybody's stories, almost like a collective yearning for a world that felt more coherent.
Right. Okay. So let's get into some specifics.
Okay.
What were those common threads?
Yeah.
Like, what were those anxieties that they all seemed to be expressing?
Well, he found a few key things
Okay.
popping up again and again.
Okay.
First was this belief that the past offered way more opportunities, not just jobs, but like
Yeah.
a real chance to get ahead, to build a good life.
Right.
Second, there was this deep dissatisfaction with the present
Okay.
and a real anxiety about the future,
Yeah.
especially for their kids.
Of course.
And finally, there was this feeling of being politically ignored,
Right.
of being culturally irrelevant.
Hmm.
Like their values and way of life are no longer valued by society.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of heartbreaking to hear, you know,
It is.
this sense of being left behind.
Yeah,
Forgot-
totally.
It's like they're watching the world move on without them.
Yeah, and this feeling of being forgotten, it ties directly into this loss of roots
Okay.
that Winlow explores. Participants talked about feeling really connected to their communities, their homes, their shared culture back in the past.
Yeah.
But now they see those bonds kind of fraying,
Right.
leaving them feeling adrift in the present.
So it's not just about missing the past.
Right.
It's about feeling unmoored in the present.
Yeah, exactly.
Disconnected from what once gave them that sense of belonging and stability.
Exactly.
And that's where he brings in this idea of postmodernism.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this might get a little heady,
Okay.
but I think it's important.
I think so, too.
Okay.
This is where Winlow connects those really personal experiences to broader intellectual trends.
Okay.
He argues that postmodernism, with its emphasis on questioning these grand narratives and deconstructing these established systems, has contributed to this feeling of instability and meaninglessness.
Wow.
It's like the old anchors of meaning have been pulled up, leaving people searching for something solid to hold on to.
Yeah, I see what he's saying. So it's not just about missing these old jobs or neighborhoods.
Right. No, it's deeper.
It's about longing for a world that made sense.
Yeah.
A world with a clear set of values and a sense of order.
Exactly.
And that sense of order is constantly under attack.
It is.
In what Winlow calls this world of permanent reform.
Ah, yes.
He argues that this relentless churn of change, driven by neoliberal ideology, just intensifies that feeling of rootlessness.
It makes sense.
Think about it. Workplaces demand more flexibility now.
Totally.
More emotional investment.
Right.
But they offer way less security in return.
It's true.
It's like you're constantly adapting.
Yeah.
But the ground just keeps shifting beneath your feet.
Yeah, you're never quite stable.
So you're expected to pour your heart and soul into your work, to be always on.
Right.
But there's no guarantee that it's going to lead to stability.
No, not at all.
Or even like a sense of accomplishment.
Nope. And that precariousness, makes the past, with its like apparent simplicity and predictability, seem even more appealing.
I get it.
It's like reaching back for something solid when everything around you feels fluid and uncertain.
Yeah, it's that longing for a time when hard work felt like it actually had a clear payoff.
Exactly.
When you could build a life with a sense of purpose and security. And for a lot of Winlow's participants, that sense of purpose was totally intertwined with their working class identity.
Absolutely.
With the skills and values that define their communities. But now, in this post-industrial world, those skills and values are often seen as like outdated and irrelevant. And that's where that feeling of being culturally irrelevant really stings.
Yeah, it really does.
It's not just about economics anymore.
No, it's not.
It's about feeling like your way of life just doesn't matter.
Right.
Like your story has been erased from the narrative of progress.
It's like being told that your experience, your whole way of life is somehow backward or wrong.
And that's got to be incredibly isolating and disheartening.
Oh, it is. Winlow describes this sense of alienation from the broader culture, from the world they see presented in the media. You know, it's like looking at from the outside, feeling like you don't belong.
I get it.
Yeah. And what really drives this home, this feeling of alienation, are the stories that Winlow shares.
Right.
Like the personal experiences of the people he actually spoke to.
Right.
It's not just some abstract theory.
Right.
It's real people grappling with all of these changes.
You know, that's what always gets me, you know. It's like those individual stories that really make all that data come alive.
Yeah.
Are there any that he shares that really stand out?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
There's this one guy, Paul, who talks about how much easier it felt to just live, you know, when he was younger.
Okay.
He talks about, like, traveling with his friends, going to Ibiza, Amsterdam.
Fun stuff.
Just, like, enjoying life without constantly worrying about money.
Yeah.
But now he's struggling to put food on the table.
Wow.
You know, pinching pennies at the grocery store.
Wow.
Worrying about whether his kids are even going to have the same opportunities that he did.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling of carefree possibility, you know?
Yeah.
It's been replaced by this gnawing sense of like scarcity and anxiety.
Totally.
Makes you wonder if maybe we've lost sight of something important, you know?
It does.
Like in our pursuit of, I don't know, efficiency or something.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Paul, you know, another participant, Arthur. He talked about how much more reliable everything seemed back then.
Okay.
The schools, the buses, the jobs, the whole system.
Right.
It just seemed to work. But now he feels like everything's kind of falling apart.
Oh, wow.
From the infrastructure to that sense of community that he used to take for granted.
It's almost like a lament for a lost world, you know, a world that felt more stable, more predictable.
Right.
And it ties back into that feeling of political alienation we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like these folks feel like the system just isn't working for them anymore.
Exactly. A lot of the people that Winlow interviewed expressed this deep cynicism about politicians, seeing them as out of touch and more concerned with their own interests than like the needs of everyday people. They feel ignored, like their voices don't matter.
Yeah, and when you feel like you're not being heard, it's easy to understand how that frustration could just boil over.
For sure.
Like a pressure cooker with no release valve.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that pressure, it often gets directed at what they see as like a decline in community life.
Okay.
There's this recurring sense of having lost that feeling of connection with their neighbors.
Right.
That shared identity that once held their communities together.
It makes me think about, you know, how we often romanticize small town life.
Yeah.
That sense of everyone knowing each other, looking out for each other.
Right.
But it sounds like what Winlow's describing is like
a
very real loss.
Yeah, it is.
Like a tangible erosion of those social bonds.
It is. And it's something that came up over and over.
Wow.
Colin, another participant, talked about growing up in a time when people actually looked after each other, when there was a real sense of solidarity.
Right.
Now he feels surrounded by strangers.
Wow.
Like that social fabric has unraveled.
There's something profoundly sad about that.
There is, yeah.
It's like they're mourning the loss of something precious.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's made even more complex by the influx of new people and cultures, which some participants see as like a threat to their way of life. They see it as like a disruption of that familiar sense of community and shared identity.
It's easy to jump to conclusions about those reactions, right?
Yeah, for sure.
To label them as like xenophobic or racist.
Right.
But Winlow seems to be trying to dig deeper, right?
He is. Yeah.
Trying to understand like the nuances of those feelings.
He's not trying to excuse them, but he's trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
He makes a point of saying, it's not about hating newcomers, but it's about this very real fear of further loss and displacement.
Okay.
It's like their own place in the world is shrinking, and their own culture and values feel marginalized.
It's like a defensive reaction, right?
Yeah, it is.
A way of trying to hold on to something familiar when everything around them is changing.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And Winlow links this fear of loss to this broader sense of rootlessness that permeates modern life.
Yeah.
He argues that this constant churn of change fueled by, neoliberal ideology has eroded those traditional sources of stability and belonging, leaving people feeling adrift.
Like they're being swept along by a current they can't control.
Yeah, that's
constantly trying to keep their head above water.
Exactly. And he uses this term destabilized.
Oh, yeah?
To describe this feeling.
Okay.
Like you're just unable to keep up with the pace of change.
Wow.
Always a step behind.
So that feeling of just being overwhelmed by all the change of the world just moving on without you.
Yeah.
And it's compounded by this pressure to constantly adapt, to reinvent yourself in this ever-shifting job market.
Exactly. Winlow points out how much is demanded of workers now.
Yeah.
Flexibility, emotional investment. Yeah.
Constant self-improvement.
Right.
But with very little security in return.
So you're supposed to be all in all the time.
Yeah.
But there's no guarantee that it's going to lead to any kind of stability.
Right.
Or even a sense of fulfillment.
Right. And that makes the past, with its apparent simplicity and predictability, seem even more appealing.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's like yearning for a time when hard work felt like it actually had a clear payoff.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you could build a life with a sense of purpose and security.
Exactly.
And for many of Winlow's participants, that sense of purpose was very connected to their working class identity, to those skills and values that were so central to their communities. But now those skills and values are often seen as obsolete.
Totally.
And that adds another layer to that feeling of being culturally irrelevant.
It does.
It's not just about economics.
Really so.
It's about feeling like your way of life is no longer valued. Right, like it doesn't matter.
It's like being told that your story just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That your experience is somehow less valid than others.
And that's where Winlow's critique of the modern left comes back in.
Okay.
He argues that by focusing so heavily on cultural issues and identity politics, the left has lost sight of these economic anxieties and the sense of cultural displacement that a lot of working class people are feeling.
Yeah, it's like they're speaking different languages almost.
Yeah, totally.
Talking past each other instead of actually engaging in a meaningful dialogue.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And this disconnect, he argues, creates fertile ground for the rise of populism.
Okay.
As people seek out leaders who promise to restore a sense of order and belonging.
Yeah.
Who speak to their fears and anxieties in a way that resonates.
So it's not necessarily about agreeing with every populist policy or slogan, right?
Right.
It's about feeling like someone finally understands your struggle.
Exactly.
Their fears.
Yeah, and this desire for understanding, for recognition, is really at the heart of Winlow's call for empathy.
Okay.
He urges us to see working class nostalgia not as some backwards-looking ideology, but as a reaction to very real losses and anxieties that need to be acknowledged and addressed, not dismissed.
So it's about bridging that gap between the intellectual elite and those who feel left behind by this relentless pace of change.
Exactly.
But does he offer any solutions, or is it just like all doom and gloom?
Well, he doesn't offer any easy answers, that's for sure.
Okay.
He's pretty upfront about the challenges we're facing. In fact, he suggests that continuing down the path we're on could lead to further decline.
Oh, wow.
To a future where inequality and instability become even more entrenched.
So not exactly a cheery outlook?
No, not exactly.
But it's not hopeless either, right?
Right. It's a call to action.
Okay.
He challenges us to confront the realities of our situation.
Yeah.
To think critically about the forces that are shaping our world and to find new ways to create a more just and equitable future.
So it's about acknowledging the pain, the loss, the anger.
Yeah.
But not letting those feelings paralyze us.
Totally.
It's about channeling them into something constructive.
Exactly. And that's where Winlow sees nostalgia as potentially playing a positive role.
Oh, okay.
He argues that reflecting on the past, understanding what's been lost, can actually help us identify what needs to be rebuilt in the present.
So it's not about romanticizing the past, right?
Not at all.
Or trying to recreate some bygone era.
Right.
It's about using it as a tool for understanding our present values and priorities.
Yeah.
Seeing what we've gained and what we've sacrificed.
Right.
in this pursuit of progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that those values, strong communities, stable jobs, a shared sense of purpose, those aren't tied to a specific time or place. They can be reimagined, adapted for the present, for the future.
It's about finding a way to create a future that feels both grounded and hopeful.
Yeah.
A future where people feel connected, valued, and empowered.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about looking back.
Right.
It's about looking forward.
Yeah.
With a renewed sense of purpose and possibility.
Exactly. And that's what makes Winlow's work so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just a diagnosis of our current ills,
Right.
but it's a call to action, a challenge to create a future that's more just, more equitable, and more fulfilling for everyone.
So it's like he's saying, we can't just wish for a better future. Right. We actually have to build it.
Yeah.
And understanding the past is a big part of that. But how do we actually do that? How do we bridge that gap between yearning for what was and needing to create something new?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Winlow doesn't really offer a simple roadmap, but he gives us some things to think about.
Okay, good.
He argues that nostalgia can actually be a really powerful motivator.
Okay.
If we use it wisely.
Okay.
Instead of getting stuck in the past, we can mine it for insights into what truly matters.
Okay.
What creates that sense of belonging and well-being,
So it's like taking those core values, right?
Right.
Community, stability, purpose.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to translate those into a language that resonates with the present, with the challenges we face now.
And it requires us to be honest with ourselves about the trade-offs we've made.
Oh.
The things we may have sacrificed, in the pursuit of progress.
Oh, wow.
Have we traded community for individual advancement?
Right.
Stability for flexibility?
Wow.
These are tough questions.
Yeah, they are.
But they're essential if we want to build a future that feels, grounded and hopeful.
It's like looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right. And asking ourselves, okay, we've come this far, but at what cost?
Right, exactly.
And what do we actually want the next chapter to look like?
And that's where Winlow's call for empathy comes in again,
Right, right.
It's not about judging people who feel nostalgic.
Right.
But it's about trying to understand those feelings.
Okay.
The losses and anxieties that are fueling them.
Because if we can understand where those feelings are coming from, maybe we can have a more productive conversation about moving forward.
Totally.
It's about finding that common ground.
Exactly.
Even when we disagree about the solutions.
For sure. And that's what I find so hopeful about Winlow's work.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the hard truths.
Right.
But he doesn't let us wallow in despair either.
Okay, good.
He challenges us to think critically, to have these conversations, and to work towards a future that honors the best of the past, while embracing the possibilities of the present.
It's a good reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in all of this, right?
Right.
We have the power to shape the narrative.
Absolutely.
To choose the values we want to guide us, to create a future where everyone feels like they belong.
And that's a future worth striving for, don't you think?
I absolutely agree. So, for everyone listening, what resonated most with you in this deep dive? What are your thoughts on the power of nostalgia, and how can we use it to build a better future?
Share your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to share this episode with anyone who might be grappling with these issues. We need to have these conversations, understand each other's perspectives, and work together to create a world that feels both grounded and hopeful.
That's a great point. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.